That is not Pensacola. Welcome back everyone to Grizzly Reviews. Today we are concluding the rewatch of the Monsterverse with my review of Godzilla vs. Kong. This is the one movie in the franchise that I have seen in theaters. I saw this movie in a Dolby theater when it came out. I was super excited. I watched the 3 movies previously beforehand. I bought the Blu-rays of those movies because of Godzilla vs. Kong's release. I had a lot of hopes for Godzilla vs. Kong. The marketing was making this to be the big brawl movie that you thought it would be. And in that sense, the movie did deliver. The epic next chapter in the cinematic Monsterverse pits 2 of the greatest icons in motion picture history against each other, the fearsome Godzilla and the mighty Kong, with humanity caught in the balance. I am going to get into spoilers for Godzilla vs. Kong, so please refrain from watching if you haven't seen this movie. There are some truly insane, spectacular things that you are going to not want to be spoiled, so turn away and come back after you've seen the movie. Godzilla vs. Kong is such a weird movie for me to try to review, because on one hand, it is very much popcorn monster movie. We are here to watch 2 giant monsters fight against each other. It's going to be camp, it's going to be stupid, it is going to be awesome. Somehow WIngard was able to take this thriller action franchise into sci-fi, which, like, to me is absolutely necessary for this franchise, camp being included into it. I have King Kong versus Godzilla. I haven't watched it yet though, so I honestly don't know if this movie is campy or not. Side note, do you want me to review the other King Kong Godzilla movies that I have? Let me know down in the comments, because I will make those reviews if you want them. I do plan on reviewing Skull Island and Monarch once godzillaxkong has passed and I've just had some downtime from this franchise. Another reason why Godzilla vs. Kong is hard to review is because I'm trying not to relate it to the 3 previous movies in the franchise. Like, King of the Monsters is this big action-filled monster battle movie. Like, there's so many kaiju battles in that film. And in this movie, you kind of just get the 2 bouts between Godzilla and Kong. The one on the ship and then the whole 3rd act, which kind of has a couple different bouts into it. Godzilla wins on the ship because you were in sea and, like, that's gonna happen. And then when we're in Hong Kong, King Kong... And then when we're in Hong Kong, the first battle, Kong wins, and then Godzilla wins the second one, and kind of just like, I am the king here, you bow down and submit to me, and Kong does. And then you have your big final battle with mechagodzilla, which is just so fucking cool. But technically, you have your first battle on the ship, and then the entire 3rd act is its own thing. You kind of have a mini battle with a flying cobra down in Hollow Earth, but it's nothing that's like this huge, big sequence. It's at the tail end of a really fantastical sci-fi sequence. So, like, how much fun am I having in this movie? Monster-wise, I think it's less than King of the Monsters. It's just that Godzilla and Kong are very limited in their powers and abilities, and Kong does gain a new one with his axe in this film, but compared to the variety of King Ghidorah, Rodan, what Mothra brings, the visual of all of the other monsters, it's just not as interesting as King of the Monsters. That being said, this is not as poorly written as King of the Monsters. King of the Monsters is very boring human dialogue that makes no sense, and it's just not good. For Godzilla vs. Kong, you have your more serious A plot with Rebecca Hall and Alexander Skarsgård, and then your B plot, which is the much more campy dialogue. This is where all the comedy comes in. Personally, I think both work, especially where the movie leads to in the 2nd act for both plot lines. I love that Brian Tyree Henry is in this movie. He is such a fantastic actor, and, like, fucking hot. And the pairing with him and Millie Bobby Brown and Julian Dennison, I think, works to make some fun comedic camp moments, which really fits for where they go, going through an underground super fast tunnel to Hong Kong that shouldn't exist. And then the whole mechagodzilla of it all, the King Ghidorah's skull, is very camp. For some it might be annoying, to me it's very refreshing after King of the Monsters. And the jokes for a rewatch at least lead to some more enjoyment after all of the twists and everything are revealed with your first viewing. What's so interesting about Godzilla vs. Kong is that this is a King Kong movie foremost. I think plot-wise, King Kong has the best narrative arc in the film, especially the characters that are with Kong and the journey that they go through. I think is very wonderful and very interesting. Thankfully, Godzilla gets to be the antagonist of this film. What you think is the primary antagonist until later things are revealed. There is something causing Godzilla to attack cities in which we've only really ever seen him be a protector in this franchise. Seeing the decimation of not Pensacola at the beginning of the film is a good start. And then I love the destruction that happens in Hong Kong. I think the way the lighting and those tall buildings, it just gives a vibrancy to this film that other movies in this franchise haven't had. Like Godzilla 2014's buildings in San Francisco are very bland. There's not any lighting. There's nothing to bounce off the characters to show more detail in their design. I say that because that all exists in Godzilla vs. Kong. When I saw this movie in theaters, I was so pissed off that the movie was saying that we were in Pensacola, and anytime you had like a crowd shot or an overhead shot or a coastal line shot, it looked nothing like Pensacola. I live not even an hour away from Pensacola, so I'm very used to how the city looks, and that was just not Pensacola. It's a very big sore thumb at the beginning of the Godzilla story of this film. Visually, Godzilla vs. Kong is off the charts. I love the coloration when we're on the ships and Kong and Godzilla are battling. That aquamarine-ish green color is so good. That shot of Kong reaching to touch the little girl's finger will forever stick in my mind. It's such a subtle detail, but the way that water and the rain is moving off of Kong, I think is really beautiful and wonderful. How he is moving so fast, but because of the size difference, the water just looks like it's moving so slowly. The way that Kong is smiling after he's eating fish, it's so very cheesy. What a fun little character detail to put in the movie. The reveal of mechagodzilla to me was also crazy and wild because you don't get any of that in the marketing for this movie, I think, if I remember correctly. So what you think is supposed to be a Godzilla fighting Kong movie turns out that they have to help each other fight this huge giant robot Godzilla that also has like the mind of one of the Ghidorah heads in it. It just makes for not only a good sequel to King of the Monsters, but just like a good sequel for the franchise in general. Mechagodzilla is great. I wish it was in this movie more. It's a weapon, so it wouldn't attack on its own, but I kind of wish that the twist of Ghidorah taking over happened way sooner in the movie. I'm really intrigued to see where they take Kong's ASL skills in godzillaxkong. We really only ever hear him sign the word home. I think he understands it in general, but that's all we're ever shown in this movie. So I hope that we see Gia and Kong have a much longer and pronounced conversation. This is an example of really poor writing. To write out the tribal people from Skull Island out of this movie and say that the entire group of people except for this little girl was wiped out from a hurricane, when I assume your facility on Skull Island has been there for a long time and you could have protected those people. To me, that is crazy. Like, how can you do that? It's so insulting to me that that's a choice they did with all the time we spent with them in Skull Island. There's also a lot of convenience that happens in the third act, or at least in the lead up to the third act. Somehow Godzilla is able to use his atomic breath and dig a hole all the way down to Hollow Earth, just so Kong is able to come back up into Hong Kong, because somehow we have to get those characters back up there. So like the whole entire journey that we went on to get to Hollow Earth, the fact that we had to use these special ships designed for it because you're like being twisted and manipulated by like time and space to get there, and now there's just a hole up to Hong Kong from it. How does that not like completely destroy like the gravitational stuff of Earth in general? That's not something I should be worried about with this movie. I should be like, oh my god, monsters fighting, yes. But in my mind, I'm just like, ugh, that hole is just not for me. There's still some really good tension and scary stuff that happens in this movie. When Ghidorah takes over the mechagodzilla suit and you just see it like slowly move its head and like start moving towards the villain when he's making his big campy villain speech. That's really unsettling and terrifying. And then when the bird alien thing down in Hollow Earth breaks the fourth wall and looks directly in camera, that is very scary and unsettling to me. The sound design in this movie is also fantastic. The way the sound cuts out when you're in Gia's perspective because she is deaf and you just hear like the thumps and the heartbeat of things. It's really like big in your ears. And then when Godzilla and Kong are having their first bouts in Hong Kong and the sound cuts out and you're just hearing the big booming sounds that they are making, that is also pretty cool. It adds a nice layer of texture to just how massive and big these creatures are. So for what it is, Godzilla vs. Kong is a very fun movie. It doesn't hit those I hate this movie, I'm so bored watching these humans levels of King of the Monsters, but it doesn't hit the height that that movie has with its monster fighting in general. And overall as a movie, it kind of just feels a little disjointed at times. Thankfully, the pace of this film is pretty quick. The monster scenes and the visuals that those are in are pretty fantastic. The movie does not waste any time at showing the monsters. There are some human characters that are introduced in this movie that I'm thankful they are continuing with the franchise. So like, I don't know how to rate this movie. I don't love it as much as the first Godzilla film. I don't hate it as much as King of the Monsters. I'm gonna give Godzilla vs. Kong a 7.5. I think if you're going on like a 4-star rating, this is a perfect 3-star movie. What I want this franchise to do most is introduce other monsters into your universe so we get more solo movies that feel like their own movie and not this big franchise film. How I would love another movie that carries the tension and horror and thrills of the 2014 Godzilla, or just like the comic book nature of Skull Island. I also want that as well too. In the end, that is my review for Godzilla vs. Kong. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this movie. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What are your thoughts? If you like this video, please give it a like, and if you want to see more, hit subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye!